Welcome back. I'm Alfred Lambremont Webre, and we have the extraordinary privilege today to be with author and contactee, Ananda Bosman. Welcome, Ananda.
Thank you, Alfred. It's a great pleasure to be back on your show.
Right. Yeah. We're so pleased that you're here to join us, and also pleased to that you're here to join us and able to corroborate and bring us a first-hand eyewitness account of what occurred at the Consciousness and Contact conference at the Pine Ridge Reservation. I think it was July 18th to 21st.
22nd, yeah.
Yeah, and that's 2019 at the Lakota Territory, and some greatly prophesized events took place there in terms of well, we're just saying because they actually took place in terms of ET craft that appeared. Was the date July 20th, 2019?
It was the Saturday, yes.
Yes, yes.
That's correct.
And
there was activity going on before as well.
Yeah. Because as you know, and we'll put all of the details in the article accompanying this panel. The Brazilian prophet Xico Xavier, whose book sold over 40 million copies worldwide, and who passed over at the age of 92 in 1986, did a prophecy. It was momentous, and he said that on July 20th, 1969, the powers that be, the source, gave an additional a period of 50 years for humanity. At that time, there was a lot of, urgency about nuclear war, etc., and possible ecocide and genocide here on the planet. But July 20th, 1969, there was a 50-year period. If on July 20th, 2019, 50 years later, World War III had not occurred, a planet-wide nuclear war, there would be no World War III, and humanity would join the peaceful community of galactic nations. And also there would be a showing of extraterrestrial craft. And throughout the world that were cognizant of these prophecies, you can go to many of the channels in Hispanic television, in Brazilian, in English speaking. They were saying, what about the July 20th, 2019? I was contacted by many people about that. And the one place where they appeared was at the Lakota Territory on July 20th, 2019.
Yeah.
Over the Consciousness and Contact. Now, and
at the Sundance, actually. So the Sundance took place.
Oh, yes, right.
All nations.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to turn it over to you. I just wanted to set the full context. Now, to set the final detail of the full context is that the period that Xico Xavier set for this 50-year context was from July 20th, 1969. And what date is that?
Yeah.
That date, whatever your position is, that date is the date that reportedly the U.S., Armstrong and all landed on the moon.
Yeah.
With all of those. I mean, I remember that, all of us who watched that and etc.
Yeah.
So I'm going to turn it over to you, eyewitness and rapporteur and contactee yourself, and you were there with a number of others.
Yes.
To report this officially for the prophecy for the record. So over to you, Ananda Bosman.
Thank you, Alfred. Very well put. Important context. The Indian reservation near Pine Ridge, the All Nations Gathering, was a fabulous place, and we thank the kindness of Chief Dallas, Chief Eagle, and his wife Becky, because their All Nations Gathering Center is also their home. Very beautiful setting, and we had from the beginning really a good rapport with Dallas Chief Eagle, and also another Lakota, which is of the younger stock, very powerful warrior, I would say, of the new generation, Emmett J. King. So they showed us around the sweat lodges and the teepees, and activity would take place down there. There were a number of contactees at the conference, and what's interesting is that at the very end we discovered that independently, three of us, at least the three of us, it might be more, we haven't contacted everyone, did pretty much the same thing. We used our own protocols and visualized pretty much the same thing before the UFO came. So there were very powerful presentations, both from the natives, Lakota, or students of the Lakota, and also, of course, from the UFO community. And it was my first presentation in the United States of America ever. I'd done Canada, of course. So I should cut the chase and go to July the 20th. So we invited to go to this very special Sundance ritual, which is generally closed to white man. And so, of course, the Indians have not been eating or drinking for 4 days, and they've been out in the sun. And I can't go into the details of what they do in the ritual. That's disrespectful, apparently. But it's very, very powerful. So they build up a very, very powerful energy that is very, very touching. I was joined by Alan Steinsfield. There was Whitley Strieber, who you could see was deeply touched and moved by the power of what was going on. And then in this build-up ceremony, not the final ceremony, there was the occurrence of this disk. Before that, I was looking up and projecting out into space to see if there would be any ships up there, which you do by a protocol of coherence, and then you put a beam through the forehead out into space, and there was a ship there, and there was a very clear portal there as well. And then what I put out was the visualization of an event very similar to Mexico in July, I think it was July the 11th, 1991, where this UFO appeared during the eclipse, the event that made Jaime Maussan very famous, because this vehicle was filmed over many clear Mayan sites. So that's what I was kind of visualizing. Something would be parked over the Sundance ritual. And then it's very hot in the sun, so most of the Indians are sitting beneath protection. So we were there and participating, watching the powerful warriors. And at some point, the disc switched on, the very beginning of which I did not witness, but many others did, and that included Kevin Briggs and David Cottrell. Now, Kevin Briggs saw a second part of the initiation of what the disc engaged. David Cottrell and a few others saw the complete initiation. And the complete initiation was two plasma beams, plasma light beams, I should say, going from the ship. down and up, and many small spheres being released through it and then disappearing. Then the plasma fields disappear and it stayed pretty much parked. I estimated roughly for 1 hour and 20 minutes, as we were not allowed to take our phones. But I have to say that is a very, very, very conservative estimation. It probably was more like 1 hour and 50 minutes. David Cottrell, I spoke with him. He thought it was more than 2 hours, even maybe 2.5 hours. But so we say 1 hour and 20 minutes just to be very, very conservative. It was a long time. And so then the secondary ritual stopped, and there was a bit of presentation by the elders. And in that time, we were called to go back to the All Nations gathering, but and a whole group had gone, and I found that my lift, I couldn't find my lift. So I went back to the Sundance. The disc is still up in the sky. And there are some of the group that just don't feel it's right to go yet, because the main Sundance hasn't occurred, and we were invited to that honorably. So then I had the opportunity. I did deliver the message that we need to go back several times, but the UFO was in the sky. So I took the opportunity to sit down and take a tree to measure what is happening to the trajectory. And I wanted to rationally, I always do that. I've had hundreds of sightings, landings, interactions, and one has to have the skeptical analysis there as well, because those questions are going to be asked. So it's better to do it when it occurs, when one has the opportunity. And so I was measuring, according to the branch, what is the trajectory of this object. And first, it appears to have a precession-like quality that you would expect of an astronomical object. But then suddenly it didn't. It changed direction. So that was just an important measure to do on a branch, because no measurements were taken. We couldn't film anything. It would be fabulous footage. There were some cameras there from the Indians filming the ritual. It would be interesting to find out at some point if any of those cameramen actually aimed it up at the sky. And after this period of 1 hour and 20 minutes, conservatively, the object just vanished. Now, in that time, some of the elders came in contact with us. So they shook my hand. They went to David Cottrell, and David had a message, which he had, because he's a contactee with the Sasani, otherwise known as the Esasani, but they were called Sasani in his childhood contacts before Bashar. So he could deliver the message to one of the chiefs there, which was basically there would be if there are earth changes, there would be a rescue operation. So that could transpire as well. Now, we found out on the Sunday after, on the 21st, as we were talking together, that is David Cottrell and Kevin Briggs, that we'd all been doing a protocol before the disc appeared. And so Kevin was doing one before and visualizing something very similar. And so was David visualizing something similar. And to test that, we decided to, at the All Nations gathering, go down to the teepees and each engage our own protocols, which we did a few minutes, and to see if there would be a result. Then Kevin left, but after 10 minutes, indeed, we got 3 very clear UFOs, extremely bright, powered up, and with flashlight-like brightness, passing a period of the sky and then disappearing. Shortly after, a second one appeared directly above David and me, with a beam initially coming from it. And then the third one, about 5 minutes later, very fast, coming towards us, changing its speed and becoming very, very slow, and then disappearing behind the house of the All Nations gathering, as if it was going to land in the field behind. David and I go up to the All Nations gathering, and we have Mia Ferraletta there, together with Becky and a few others who are talking, and we relay what has happened and what we did. And what's interesting is then from the Lakota side, Becky, who is Dallas Chief Eagle's wife, She goes to the bathroom window, and in that field where we calculated the trajectory of the UFO possibly landing, she did see two UFOs, one with a beam scanning the ground, near to the ground, and a second one near to the ground. So that kind of brought a culmination to it. There had been sightings also in the days before, including with myself and with it was Lisa who Thomas Emanuel brought. He was coming from New York, and he brought a friend along. She'd never seen a UFO, so she got to see several UFOs. I called one next to the teepees, and then she got to see one for herself up by the car park above the All Nations Gathering Center. And it changed direction into the constellation of Cassiopeia. And there were all kinds of spheres that were being seen by participants as well. But what was interesting about the Sundance, because this takes place on another site, and with all the energy that was built up there by the Lakotas, is that the object was pretty much, it moved a bit, but pretty much parked in the same place over the ceremony, and so consistently. We also learned that, and this was very interesting because I'm not non-American, I'm European, the power and the rights of the land of the Indian nation, it was really like going into another country there, coming out of Rapid City and going through the Badlands into the reservations. It feels completely like an Indian nation, it's an Indian country. So Emit J. King was relaying how in the days before and weeks before the event, there had been increased UFO sightings, there had been Bigfoot sightings, and of course in the oral tradition of the Lakota, when this occurs, it means something big is coming up ahead. But he was also relaying that members of ICE in civilian clothing had been seen on the Indian reservation, and this was calculated by the license plates. And this is a declaration of war. So a declaration of war had actually been put onto those ICE agents, that they would be detained. There's two things they can do under the Constitution for the Indians on Indian reservations. They can detain them and question them and or shoot them. So they do have, and the police works with them there. So they do have, in that sense, a good defense, a sense of defense, of defending their sacred ground, the Indian reservation ground. And he gave many, many examples of this. And the new generation of Indians, there's tremendous poverty there, it's true, but there's also an emerging new generation that is holding the spirit, that has the contact. And that's very, very good to see. It is the Lakota of South Dakota through Standing Elk, who in 1996 initiated a historical event, which was bringing all of these different tribes together from the east, the south, the west, the north, including the Mayans, including the Samisk of Norway, and even including an Aborigine elder from New Zealand in the 1313 event of 1996. Where all of these different tribes relay that their star law is coming from the star elders or star elder nations, and that they themselves in their oral traditions are coming from the star elder nations, and that some, not all, but some within each of the tribes have continued contact with the space nations. So that was historical in that sense. Also, they talked about their medicine traditions, the commonalities with their medicine traditions. Two big secrets that came out in 1996, but it was the Lakota of South Dakota at South Dakota that engaged that event in 1996. So this is also ad hoc or continuum. It's almost like this object parked over the Sundance was winking to the Lakota, because they initiated a unification of nations with the common message of their star heraldry and of their continued contact, at least with some of the different tribe elders. And of course, then with the anniversary of the moon landing, and I'm here in California at the moment, staying with my friend filmmaker Param Jill, and we were just talking about the moon landing, and especially Maurice Chatelain, who was the NASA chief of communications, and he was the inventor of the eagle that landed on the moon, probably with some form of exotic technology. His testimony in 1979, he did numerous interviews, I think with Lou Zinstag and Timothy Good, and he published his book, Our Ancestors Came from Outer Space, which is still available on Amazon, so it means members of his family are still a hold of the copyrights there. So he stated clearly that every single Apollo mission was followed by UFOs. Apollo 11 was followed by UFOs. We do have various testimonies of Buzz Aldrin talking about at least one or two encounters. But he said that when they landed at Tranquility, that there were UFOs parked, a lot of them, all along the crater's edge. And of course, we know from whistleblowers, 1988 Naval Intelligence Officer, Petty Officer Milton William Cooper released a penalty under penalty of perjury, his statement with all of his naval forms that he read in Operation Majority, 1970. That the astronauts were followed by UFOs. They were there on the moon. They had to change aspects of what took place for the public, and that the astronauts were sworn an oath of secrecy, which, if broken, would render an expediency to them and their families, a death penalty, in other words. It's interesting that then in 2011, Buzz Aldrin appears in the science fiction movie Transformers 3, where he states, and I think it's in a public audience, yes, we found bases on the moon. There were UFOs there. We were not alone, and we were sworn an oath of secrecy that had a penalty of expediency for us and our families. So that must have been very, very exciting for Buzz Aldrin. Buzz Aldrin's body language in this whole controversy of the moon has been very, very interesting. When he was challenged by a journalist who believed in the lunar hoax, the landing hoax, and who confronted Buzz Aldrin, he said, how dare you say we went to the moon when the evidence says we don't? And Buzz Aldrin takes his fist and punches him, and the guy falls flat on the floor. So he was clearly very charged, and that was his immediate body language response. Something did happen, and probably Kubrick was involved as well. There's indications of that and many other factors. But it's very interesting indeed, as you've pointed out, that the July 20th date was that landing on the moon, and falls exactly 50 years, a golden jubilee, to the UFO over the Lakota, and fulfills Xico Xavier's prophecy, 50-year prophecy, which is fabulous, extraordinary. And it's fabulous that it happens to the Lakota as they initiated this native disclosure in 1996.
Right. I wanted to ask you, thank you for that amazing summary, which I would say is historic and actually is epochal. if in fact this is sort of a formal interdimensional declaration of the end of Earth's quarantine. Quarantine in this manifestation of human civilization on the planet, our isolation from the rest of universe society is formally ending. That was the nature of the nature of the prophecy. I want to ask you about this, which is a further synchronicity, which I find so interesting around this cusp of dates almost. If we look at the date of July 26, 2019, now July 26, I happen to have been raised in Cuba. My mother's family is from Cuba. That's the date of the Cuban Revolution. Well, that's a geopolitical date. However, more importantly, that is the day out of time in the Mayan calendar. And it's kind of the new year in this galactic calendar. And some people say that the Mayan calendar is actually a Pleiadian calendar. And the Pleiadians are members of the Regional Galactic Governance Council, as we know from the visits of the Regional Galactic Governance Council in 2010, when they showed themselves, they predicted, and then they decloaked themselves over New York City,
yeah,
over the UN, and it's the Pleiadians, the Alpha Centaurians, the Sirians, and others who are members of the Regional Galactic Governance Council, and they're kind of the caretakers or the gardeners of planet Earth.
Mm.
You know.
Well, my understanding of that is they are part of the super civilization that operates in many different times. A lot of people take the Pleiadian scenario from Billy Meyer. We don't have to do that, but that's very controversial. We have Enrico Castilla Rincon, who had a period of time bona fide contacts. He passed lie detector tests. There were professors that saw the UFOs that first they got the communications, very much like we've done in many groups of the world. And then the sightings come in things like Dialogues to the Cosmos, what we do, or CE5 as some others call it, but which have been taking place since 1952 with George Van Tassel and 10,000 people before there were satellites. So his Pleiadians were basically saying their sun doesn't exist today because the blue stars of the Pleiades are very young, they're very radioactive, so you can't have life there at all, not in this time. But they're saying basically they're time traveling, they've stopped cellular meiosis so that they're able to time travel, and their sun is billions of years ago, where they live is billions of years ago in the region of the Pleiades, and they coordinate with the galaxy and the intergalactic systems from that point back in time. Our experience, or the format that when we had the Council of 888, which was related to Andromeda, what they relayed in their template is that they were going time reverse, so from the far future, but actually decoupling from another universe and then manifesting bodies and materials that are of the equivalence of the particular planet, solar system that they are to manifest and maneuver and tune. And so speaking with Kevin, it was funny that because he has Council of 8 and my communications were starting 1985 contacts. We've talked about that before on your show. And the tensor beam contacts stopped in 2001, as they predicted. I had to use another form of contact. Only very briefly might a tensor beam contact occur after 2001 for very specific reasons and for my protection. But his Council of 8 is also Andromeda based. He just has a slightly different format on it. So it seems the different contactees are receiving different facets of a much greater reality. I personally believe that the UFO, the environment of the contact that occurs, the information, the cosmologies they give are part of a graphic interface they've given us, very much like Windows or Mac iOS, that deals with a much higher reality, almost impossible for us to deal with. Our sensory apparatus would explode by the full reality of this super civilization. But what was interesting with this 1 hour and 20 minutes with the object parked there, no military came. Of course, it's illegal for the military to come to at that height, which was possibly 2,500 meters. So they would be violating airspace there. So that could be a factor, or it could also imply that it was allowed. It was accepted and allowed. And if that is the case, it even more so gives validity to Xico's prophecy.
Right, right. Now, here we go. Now, to go back to the issue of the dates, here we have a July 20th, 1920th, which has been given as sort of a culmination date, and that's a date coming up to sort of a cusp date, which is the date out of time. So in terms of the cyclical date, and in the date out of time, you're supposed to just look at the culmination of actions, because it's the beginning of a new cycle. So wouldn't it be meaningful that a prophecy like this would be given on July 20th, would be fulfilled on July 20th, so that then those awakening souls would have time to think, to really process it, that, oh my God, we're not going to have World War III. That's all over.
Yeah.
And humanity is now going to be permitted to enter the community of nations. And then just about less than a week later, on July 26, 2019, is when the day out of time occurs. It's sort of a no time day when there's all this processing. It's a culmination of cycles before the next cycle begins. And I wondered if you could comment on that.
Yes.
Starting back, and then coming up, did the man's landing on the moon 50 years back start a trigger that then culminated in that? I mean, this is a lot of speculation, but it's a lot of reality as well.
I can add a little bit to that. I mean, what I was visualizing, and that was just out of my subconscious mind, was that Mayan calendrical event of the fifth sun, I think it was, that was born by that lunar eclipse on July the 11th, 7/11, 1991. And the UFOs were parked over many different Mayan sites, or maybe the same object over different sites, and were filmed crystal clear, because cameramen were there to film the eclipse. And of course, the Mayans and the Pleiades, yes, it's true that Powhatan, the proto-Mayan god, and his son Yaoti are making the creation of the galactic game board by the rattle of the galactic snake, which is the Pleiades zone. So it's between Orion and the Pleiades. And then Powhatan and Yaoti come down in their Ku vehicles, and the Ku vehicles are shown as spheres, wheels with 8 folded symmetries inside, and come to Oaxaca and train the contactee shamans there, the pre-Mayans, in many remarkable systems, including the calendrics, and giving descriptions of being time travelers or extratemporals in that sense. So the Pleiades is very much linked to that. And so that's what I was visualizing. I was visualizing that birth of the fifth sun event out of my subconscious, and it's exactly such a phenomenon that occurred then in 2019. So that very much synchronizes then 6 days later to that no-time portal opening that you refer to. But that was just coming out of this subconscious substrate in that sense. But that's pretty much how it occurred.
Yeah, so it, it actually seems, people are talking about ascension and moving out of 3D through 4D and into the 5D world and into the new earth world. And it seems to me that all of these are signifiers and kind of markers that, in fact, uh, either we are moving into the 5D world, or the 5D world is manifesting or coming down upon us, or the 3D world is melting away, to use a lot of different metaphors.
Well, we do have the work from the Soviet Academy of Sciences, Dr. Dmitriev, where they were analyzing the solar system plasma toroidal density from 1963 to 93. It went up exponentially. So there was like, if you put it into percent, 1,000% increase in toroidal density and a 60% increase of toroidal plasma density in the inner solar system, which then, of course, ignited the auroras on Neptune, on Uranus, on Saturn by 1994, the great white spot of Saturn, then the auroras of Jupiter. Suddenly, Ganymede, the moon of Jupiter, started to produce green auroras, which is the signature of oxygen. The whole solar system became highly activated, energized. And one of the NASA probes going to the edge of the solar system had hadron detectors. And so we're actually detecting hadrons. And that there was also the sonoluminescence phenomena, which was pushing this new material, this new density, exotic matter, as it is described in the literature, in the science literature, into the solar system. So our whole solar system is going into a new density. Of course, at the same time, in the new science, not the old science, quantum mechanics is 1934 and can't deal with living systems, but the new science, hadronic mechanics, great revolutionary strides have been made in understanding hypergenetics, as it's called. It's a new branch of genetics, which sees already the living uncoiled DNA, but that which is connected to base pairs, at least 4 base pairs, which quantum mechanics cannot deal with 4 quantas. It needs a single quanta. But the new hypertopic plane and genotopic plane and isotopic plane of hadron mechanics can begin to do that. And it describes that the living DNA is operating in a 8 arrows of time continuum. So this was already demonstrated in 1990 by Professor Chris Illert, a great maverick scientist in Australia, who was modeling conch shells and their morphology and trying to simulate them on computers. And in so doing, found that Euclidean mathematics didn't work, so that the conch shells that were being simulated would crumble very rapidly. And he discovered Dr. Ruggiero Santilli's isomathematics, which is a brand new mathematics that unifies all other mathematics, and which has produced a new chemical class called isoelectrons, which are superconductors at body temperature and even higher temperatures, which changes astronomy tremendously. It also changes the nature of our bodies and what they are tremendously. So he could use these mathematics, and he could also use the genotopic mathematics, which takes the isotopic plane into a fractal holographic form. It's the evidence of a holographic universe. And he found that if you use 6 arrows of time in the genotopic plane, so the present cube of the present moment, backwards and forwards time by Newton's third law, in the future, a cube with 2 arrows of time backwards and forwards, and in the past, backwards and forwards time, at every bifurcation growth of the conch shell, it is time traveling with all 6 arrows of time. So he was able to model 100,000 different conch shell morphologies that way, proving that primitive life uses 6 dimensions of time. However, with more complex forms like mammals, you need at least 8 arrows of time. With his discoveries in 1994, together with Dr. Ruggiero Santilli, he patented the first hadronic space-time machines made out of this new material. We have to re-engineer ourselves to be able to operate in those. The first realization of those patents will be as hadronic fax machines. He also patented a series of Stargate portals, very advanced stuff. And gradually, hadronic mechanics has been developing more and more hadronic chemistry and hadronic computing, which is superior to quantum computing, and femtotechnology, which is superior to picotechnology and nanotechnology, and works with the intelligence in the heart of the atom, so therefore cancels the whole nanotech game, which is all part of corporate science and is very, very exciting, but it is being protected too, because there are enemies of this science. The latest breakthrough that came out in 2012 and 2013, presented in San Marino in March 2013, is Professor Stein Johansen, Trondheim University, who we know quite well, who is a pioneering hadronic philosopher, but also a scientist. He was able to take the 8 arrows of time to 512 dimensions using Octonian physics. And Octonian is a very interesting mathematical entity. It appears to be alive. It's 8-dimensional, and it has, as a single topology, 7 dimensions on it, but it's all part of a Mobius. So the inside becomes the outside. Every dimension becomes every other dimension on the 8-dimensional Octonian. So he was able to place all the different number groups, the rational, the irrationals, along the Octonian 3, so 8 times 8 times 8 octonians equals 512 dimensions. This way he cracked the 512K problem, and prime numbers are no longer a problem, so they are completely and totally resolved. He could reduce that to a 512 hertz keyboard, and 512 hertz is extremely important because it's the electromagnetic resonance of water, which Dr. Andrija Puharich during the 70s and 80s found when he electrolyzed water with 8 cycles per second. After 72 hours, this 512 hertz would appear, and a sideband of harmonic frequencies from 720 to 360 hertz with 432 hertz as the A tone in there. And then amino acids started to form in sterile water. And those amino acids rapidly became fractal-like, Mandelbrot-like proteins. So life generated by the excitation of 8 hertz, and 512 hertz being the window when suddenly life appears out of nowhere, just in water stimulation by 8 hertz, which is the central resonance of our DNA, maximum creativity in the brain. All healers he analyzed are releasing 8 hertz, etc. So Professor Stein Johansen reducing this to a 512 hertz keyboard was important. He knew this Puharich data. We talked about it extensively. And Puharich had worked up to 506 dimensions. He just was 6 dimensions short. So the irrational would become the minor tones, and the rational, the major tones. And by this system, he is able to generate all number equations. Now, within 1 second of our body, there are so many mathematical equations taking place. Within the cytoskeleton, the microtubules of one cell is a skeleton, it's a processor, it's a computer, it's alpha and beta tubulin, which are 4 nanometers each. And so in the nanoscale, outside the normal range of physics. And the processing capacity of one cell of these microtubule networks is equivalent of the whole nervous systems. As we have 32 trillion cells in the body, we have the potential, should we engage our cellular awareness, of being 32 trillion versions of ourself, which would be something we would need when we start to process the nervous systems of everybody and to look out through each other's eyes, as apparently the super civilizations do operate in that foundation. They look through each other's eyes because they are part of a greater topological all oneness, and an anthropos, which is part of their acknowledged cognition. It's their anthropic satience. So within the microtubule, there is constant mathematical equations occurring as enzymes, amino acids, neurotransmitters, other elements come in contact with the alpha and beta tubulin. And we have 32 trillion cells, and the microtubules in one cell are enormous in networks. So in 1 second, all numbers must be occurring already within that scale, the cytoskeleton, the cell skeleton scale. That furthermore, if you take the DNA continuum of the DNA molecules, 250 replications per second, which are generally done through 8 hertz, causing the proton zipper to unzip, or relations between organs, it's quite clear that all mathematical equations must be occurring in a second. And what the implications of Professor Sten Johansen are is that that would require a back set of 512 dimensions to give us the appearance of a 3D reality. And 1 minute of animation, of dynamic animation, not static animation, we're animated beings, would give us 30,720 dimensions. So the multidimensionality of three-dimensionality is what is now becoming rather objectively apparent in these new scientific breakthroughs, which are fresh, really brand new. And so that, in a way, is also mankind awakening to their multidimensional, hyperdimensional nature within the empirical sciences, where the implications are inescapable there. It's staring us straight in the face. But this is beyond just 4D or 5D. This is now multi-D. We're looking at a multi-dimensional topology and foundation of man. I think the manifestation of the UFO, in our experience of it, is generally the protocols we engage are those of utilizing 8 hertz in the heart, which is measured by biofeedback, and 8 hertz in the mind. And we also do sustained 8 hertz biological coherence in the life force center. That's what it responds to. And as I spoke to Professor Erling Strand in Norway, who was heading the Osterwald University studies of the Hessdalen light phenomenon, working with 5 other governments of other countries, including the SETI organization of Italy. I asked him, with all their scientific equipment, did you ever experience a signal of 8 hertz before the lights appear? And the reason I'm speaking to him on the phone, it's November 1998, and we had got a great picture of a UFO over a site where we'd done a chronesthesia experiment from 1996 to 2010. Chronesthesia means psychological time travel. And the UFO had appeared right over that site. It was the perfect conjunction with Galactic Center, so November 26th, 1998, according to the naval observations. And apparently that same UFO had been photographed. I never saw the picture. I have the picture of the one over our side at the Golfjellet in Valdres, Norway. But apparently the same vehicle, one that looks like it, was at Hessdalen. So that's why we're talking. So I said, did you ever see a signal of 8 hertz? And he says, well, Ananda, as a matter of fact, every time the light phenomena appears, there is a signal of 7.4 to 7.8 hertz. And then, of course, the lights are filmed taking on plasma and then becoming quite stable, solid objects. The HERO, Hessdalen Research Association, and SETI from Italy, they do a spectral analysis of the object. And in the spectral analysis, it shows its composition. And in the composition is the rare earth element, scandium, which is local there. It's extremely exotic element. It's used in the stealth bomber and high technologies, but it's local in the area, and it's a very stable element, a rare earth element. It travels 30,000 kilometers and then takes a 180-degree turn. And when one of the scientists takes a torch and flashes at it 3 times, it responds. So knowing the protocols, having trained myself since 1985 in summing UFOs, and having seen that in biofeedback, I decided to do my experiment at Hessdalen. So with the camera view, I would not do any protocol whatsoever. So I did that many dozens of times. And then 2 times I used the protocol, and immediately a UFO appears in the classical form and jumps over the trees on the 2 occasions. And I've got those. Those are captured, and demonstrating that the protocol of 8 hertz is the response. And why would the UFO, I was talking with Param yesterday, why would the UFO respond to a protocol? What we understand from our interactions, communications, decoding, and a lifetime to have the human meditation on cosmic disclosure, it's a human process, very valid one, everyone has to go through it, is that the super civilizations, hyper civilizations, respond to the most creative part of humanity. We have maximum creativity when we're in an 8 hertz mind state in all dendrites of the brain. And the heart peaks at compassion in the research of the Heart Math Institute at 8 hertz. If you contract the prostate or uterus, the EEG, and this is the University of Vienna, the scientists found the EEG shows a cycle of 8 hertz. So the portal, the stargate of life, the insemination, happens through an 8 hertz process. But it is the maximum creative field of humanity. What was important with the heart math work is that for the first time ever, the pilots that could sustain coherence, an 8 hertz peak of heart cardio, toroidal magnetic fields that go into the golden proportion, which is itself extraordinary because it's a coherent laser, is that when they then focus their intent on a DNA sample, that they could cause it to uncoil, to coil more, or change in the middle. And more recent experiments, 3 results at the same time: change in the middle, coiling and uncoiling, and half a mile distance instantaneously, showing for the first time that compassion peaking at 8 hertz has a non-Hertzian component. It acts like a time machine. So compassionate love is a time machine and is a genetic engineer. More recent experiments now with Dr. Ventura, and this is all done in our book, which will be released very soon. We're just polishing it off here now in California. Dr. Ventura did work with stem cell research because Dr. Luc Montagnier, the great virologist who's known for his work with AIDS, he did a very interesting experiment where he had a container of water with a bacterium of DNA, and he had a container with sterile water, and he surrounded that with a 7 hertz field. And the 7 hertz field enabled the teleportation of the DNA bacterium into the sterile water. And so since the heart peaks at 8 hertz in sustained coherence, in compassionate love, that which enables willed intent to change genetics for the first time. So the genetic engineer of man begins to become a reality. Otherwise, we would appear to be a genetic robot, because all the control groups that were not in a coherent state, that were in beta rhythms, they were in stress, chit-chat, their focus on the DNA sample after fluorescence readings before and after had no effect on the DNA. So we have been genetic robots, and now mankind is awakening to becoming genetic co-creators. Dr. Ventura then took that data, and there were stem cells teleported into the Petri dish. So this is brand new, cutting-edge stuff. The implications of that are extraordinary. It means that over some generations, as we learn the biofeedback practice from a young child onwards of utilizing 8 hertz in mind and heart in body, so that becomes our standard central nervous system operating system, we will be able to teleport our stem cells into brand new cells needed in our organs, like the heart or the liver. We will be able to regenerate ourselves. So it is very significant that the UFO appears with an almost 8 hertz signal. And in response to the 8 hertz signal, in 2013, we were high in the Swiss Alps at the Simplon Pass. There was a small group of 14 or 16 people. Every one of the group was taught the protocols. Every one of the group got their experience with the UFO on that particular dialogues, which was a very good one. And what they would experience is, as they did the protocol, the UFO that would appear and move towards them was identical to their inner psyche, was somehow related to them, as like their families. And then they would glow their heart in sustained coherent, and the object would glow up too. or they would pulse the heart incoherence 3 times and the object would flash 3 times. So it wasn't the laser that was being pointed, it was the heart coherent laser, which has a very strong effect and impact on the person that's engaging. That is extremely touching. And you also experience the intelligence that's instantly responding, being present within the anthropic ontological foundation of being, within one's very soul and psyche. Or another phenomena that occurred is, as the UFO manifested, one would project to it, and then it would jump and flash. In one particular jump and flash, it looked like it was time travel. Like you could see many of these UFOs, like the area it was jumping through, time and space, had become something completely different. And all of us saw that, so on both nights, and they came very close. They came very close to the ground. The ones that came very close moved extremely fast as spheres. And a very similar vehicle to the one over the Lakota Sundance, which I knew was an intelligence, Athena, then guided us down the mountain in the morning dawn, a big golden ship. One thing I do want to mention with the Sundance UFO, which is interesting. So before, all of us felt this connection. Then when the disc was there, I was trying to tune to it, and I wasn't getting a communication from it. So it seemed almost like it was a ship that wasn't piloted. And the same was with Kevin Briggs. He had exactly the same impression, even though we had all that communication before, and it appeared exactly as we all 3 of us had visualized. Alan Steinsfield went to each of us, much to his credit, to us. So, well, what is this? What is it? I said, well, I'm not getting anything from you. He said, no, I'm not getting anything from it either. So he asked each of the people that way, because in the beginning, the rationale saying, could this be a drone? But then Whitley was suggesting it could be an FBI drone, as now it was 20 minutes. But since it was there for at least an hour and 20 minutes, no drone has the power, and it's a tremendous amount of power, to stay parked pretty much in one position for so long. So drone is eliminated. That's not possible. And so that's important. So the multidimensional aspect, I think, is emerging in different ways. We've got this phenomena that the whole solar system is energizing. It's creating global warmings and coolings, or changing of the seasons rapidly in all of the different planets of the solar system. It's increasing the density of the solar system. And then within our sciences, we're discovering that the nature of our reality is in fact needing a foundation. There's at least 512 dimensions per second. And then the science of genetic engineering by coherence in the heart, in objective biofeedback measurements, also happen to be the protocols by which the UFO engages us. The super civilization wants to synergize with us. It doesn't want to take us over. And the only way to synergize with us is if we become citizens of the super civilization. I think citizenship, the passport or the visa perhaps to begin with, is biological coherence, is being able to have sustained coherence. Now the heart math research showed early on in the 90s that sustained coherence peaking at 8 hertz in the heart also induces 8 hertz in the mind, and the golden proportion from the brain waves, which is the most coherent cascade you can get. So you've got the most profound creativity. All of the great artists and musicians were in these creative states, and that will become the foundation of man. That is our passport, that is our visa, and that will be our golden foundation by which the super civilizations can synergize. So 2 golden waves become a sun that is greater than both. One is extratemporal, Homo universalis, that is traveling past, present, and future. One is in apparently linear time. As the 2 synergize, you start to get a parabolic relation that probably goes beyond this universe. As far as I understand it, this is in the Vedas, in the Purusa Suktaheim of the Godhead. It's in our communications. It's in many communications of many contactees, and it's in your work as well. That we are joining an omniverse, which is not just a multiverse. The Vedas call that Brati Brahmanda, but it's the Mahabrahmanda. It's an omniverse of myriads of universes that are all part of a cosmic anthropos, or cosmic intelligence. The Rig Veda calls that Isa is the breath of the omniverse, and the Christi, or Christi Nam means name, it's the root of our name. So the Christi are the cosmic people that are breathing the satience of Isa, of the Godhead. So that's even the root of our Jesus Christ, Isa Christi. So the cosmic people that breathe the Godhead. So that this omniversal absorption of our universe and invitation into an omniversal citizenship is at hand.
Oh, wow. So this is the emergence of the Omniverse.
As you have written.
And it emerged on July 20th, 2019 at Lakota Territory. And it emerged on July 26, 2019, the day out of time, and it keeps emerging in every day. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Alfred.
For that magnificent explanation. It is now exactly 1 hour, exactly.
Perfect.
And we had indicated that that was the time, and we synchronistically brought everything together. How can people follow you and your work, Ananda?
So our book will be released on Amazon next month. AnandaBosman.com, 432hertz.com. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And we will also be back in British Columbia soon. That's where you interviewed us last, and where we have met several times, which has been a great pleasure. And we will be holding an event at the Mystic Manor of Shania Ray, which we'll probably do in concert with you and Omniverse.net.
Oh, excellent. And so, as they say, until we meet again, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Alfred. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you.